Hey, what's going on, everyone? So, I wanted to go over some of the formats that we're going to be using for the duration of for the remainder of this class. So, I finished grading assignment two the last couple of days, and you guys did a really good job. And as you've seen through the course material that's available through Books 24/7, and probably some of the research you've done on some of the formats in terms of the database development and developing ERD models and the like. There are many standards, and unfortunately, there is no industry standard. So, like any development team, they typically adopt one particular standard, so everyone is on the same sheet of music. So we're going to do the same thing. So if you would, I've posted a page out there under the Cyber Cafe, and it should show up in weeks 3 and 4 as well. And I'll check that here in just a few minutes. But there are a few standards that I would like to set in place for the remainder of this class. So if you just take a look at this and make sure that you're clear on how this is going to be set up. So there are a few very important details that we need to cover on all of these ERD models. First and foremost, each entity is going to be in the proper format with a title that is a singular noun in capital letters. So it's important that it's a singular noun because I've seen people use a title of pianos, for instance, and the reason we choose to use a singular noun is that it's possible that entity can contain only one piano. So let's keep the title as a singular noun and make sure that the entity title is capitalized. Now that rule will kind of change a little bit when we start moving into the relational models and moving toward this ERD model into a model that we use to actually design our database and design those tables. Um, Secondly, each entity must have an identifying attribute or a primary key that will be underlined, and I'll show you that here in just a second. Um, each entity must list all of the attributes contained therein to include the primary key and foreign keys. Now, let's not worry too much about the foreign keys at this very moment, but certainly in project one, when you put together the ERD for that project, you're going to include the foreign keys. So um, each relationship will be properly formatted to show its relation, i.e., one to one or one to many, and then each relationship will be um, properly configured to display the cardinality constraints, whether it's optional or mandatory. So let's take a look at a couple of these real quick. So in terms of the entity and its formats, again, you're going to have an entity name, and then it's going to have an identifier, and then this is a partial identifier, and not too worried about that at this point. But and then it has the the attributes beneath, and there have already been some information about the composite keys and multi-valued keys and so on and so forth, and some people have provided some very good information on that in the last discussion. So there's also some examples of our relationships, and now this, by the way, is a ternary relationship or a relationship between three entities, and there was some discussion about that, and that's exactly how that's set up, and I'll show you here in just a second how to get rid of that type of relationship because we just can't do that in SQL. In terms of the relationship cardinality and the cardinality constraints, um, this is many to one. I'm sorry, mandatory one, mandatory many, optional one, and optional many. And I believe that I've already provided some information on that in some of the responses to to some of your assignments, as well as the video that I provided in week 2 or 3, one of those. Um, and again, this is the 3 different types of binary relationships that we're going to be using. Make sure that you identify specifically whether it's one-to-one, which are very, very rare, one-to-many, or many-to-many. And again, the many-to-many relationships are only for the ERD models, and we'll see as we um, move toward the relational models, we have to get rid of those many-to-many relationships because you just can't do that in SQL. Um, so these are examples of the cardinality constraints that we will be using, and each end of all of your relationships will have one of these. This is mandatory one, mandatory many, optional one, optional many, and so this kind of demonstrates how these cardinalities are determined. So, for instance, a patient history is recorded for one and only one patient. So, so that means that excuse me, sorry about that. So each patient is only going to have one history, and now so this is going to be mandatory on both ends because each patient must have a history, and then if there is a history, it must be associated to a patient. Now, you'll notice that there is a many at this end, and this is because a patient must have recorded at least one history, but can have many, depending on, for instance, if he sees more than one doctor. And likewise, we also have an example here of an optional cardinality constraint, and you'll notice that this relationship is many to many. So of course we'll be getting rid of that with an associative entity later on, but this is many to many, and this end is mandatory because a project must be managed by an employee. So it says an employee can be assigned to any number of projects or may not be assigned to any at all. So this end is optional, but a project must be assigned to at least one employee and may be assigned to many. So this end is mandatory. So we're going to indicate that with the single line, and then optional is going to be the circle indicating that it's optional. And again, this is just an example of how those relationships and cardinalities are going to be depicted in our ERD. So as I mentioned before, if we have a relationship that is many to many, we are eventually going to want to get rid of that, and we will use what is called an associative entity. And I'm sure that we've covered that already. So this is our initial relationship between two entities. The entities are employee and course, and this of course is a many to many because an employee can attend many courses, and one course can contain um, many employees in attendance. So now this relationship in itself has an attribute of its own called date completed. So so what we're going to do here is create an associative entity, and now notice the difference between the associative entity and the regular entity. And notice how the format is a little different, and your ERDs, I'm sure, will at some point have associative entities because you will probably have some many-to-many relationships that you need to eliminate. So, and you'll notice that once we place the associative entity in this relationship, the many ends of the relationship are now at the associative entity rather than being at either end of the original entities, and that's very, very important. And finally, this is an image of a properly formatted ERD model and how it should look. And notice that we have all of the relationships have two symbols at either end, indicating whether it's mini a mini cardinality or an optional, and I'm sorry, a mandatory cardinality or an optional, and then either end shows whether it's one to many, and then now there are a couple of associative entities here which include produced in and works in. And now we'll get more into the associative entities, but you'll notice that, as I mentioned, the many ends of this relationship are now at the associative entity, whereas before the many relationships were at either end of the original entities. So take a look at that, and again, start getting familiar and comfortable with this type of format. Now, the one of the main reasons that I want to go in this direction is that, excuse me, there were several people that use the format where you have the entity and you have a bunch of bubbles out here with the attributes and it just gets clustered and haphazard. So this is a lot neater. This definitely shows everything that we need to see in terms of the ERD model and the direction that we're going to be heading when we move to the relational model. So take a look at that, and if you have any questions about that, please let me know, and I appreciate it.